Hello, my friends, and welcome to the third season of the Brand Your Dream Show. And today, our guest is Randy Peyser. She is editing books, she is ghostwriter, and she is an author of several interesting books, such as Crappy to Happy, which is featured in Eat, Pray, Love, The Power of Miracle Thinking, and she then author of the Write a Book program. And we will mention all the links in the description below, and also her books and the books of her clients mentioned in such amazing places like Oprah Magazine, Time Magazine, Wall Street Journal, and in many other TV channels in USA, which probably not everybody know everywhere around the world, but she is amazing. Hi, Randy, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, because, I love helping people create huge visibility. That's what I do, so the way I do it, is through the publishing channel and getting people's books placed with the New York publishers, helping them with the content, whatever it takes, and then pitching. That's what I do. But the real emphasis, as is the emphasis of this show, is to help people get visibility. And one of the things that I have found is that one of the most amazing things that helps people get visibility is having a book. But not only a book that's like self-published, you can get maybe, a certain amount of visibility. But if I can take a book to New York and pitch it, and all of a sudden that book is in bookstores all over the country, and, all of a sudden the publisher's pitching for foreign rights, and, that's going to create a lot of visibility.
Exactly. And when we had this conversation, you told me that I have direct access to publishers. I know people in the industry. That's why I
Yes,
can do this. Connection is everything.
it
So
is.
when I'm thinking about the book, and I know that for many coaches and for many experts, it's a right way to fame, right way to make more money and to build careers. So basically, we build books, we become speakers, we become visible, we show up with our expertise, with our story, and that's how we build the trust and credibility pretty much, right? So I want to ask you a specific question about visibility because there are
Sure.
many ideas in the market when people say, well, you just need to pay me this much money and you will become visible. And pretty much this deal will be like you mentioned, almost a self-published book or a little bit more, or probably somebody unknown. So it will not really create that much of credibility. And there is a right way how to create the properly published book, which will create this impact, which will be shown everywhere, which will be in every bookstore, which will create this impact in
Right.
newspapers. So what is the difference from your professional perspective, and how to find the right way, how to find the right publisher to create this proper visibility?
Okay, first I want to describe the difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing. We'll start from that place. And I always tell people I'm not attached to which way you want to go at all. I pitch books to traditional publishers. I have referral partners for self-publishing. What I truly want is what is highest and best for each person and their project, depending on their goals. So I'm going to start from like reverse engineering and talk about what is the goal. So what I tell people is, if your goal is you want to make more money per book, you want to get a book out quickly, and you want control over every aspect of it, from your cover to your title to every word that you've written, then self-publish. If you are using your book for a career, definitely try for a traditional publisher. Why? You'll have wide bookstore distribution, and media will be very, very interested in interviewing you. And like, for example, my first book I ever sold was like over 20 years ago. It was called Nice Girls Do Get the Sale.
Mhm.
And it's a book about, sales closing techniques and just all kinds of things like that. The author, Eleanor Stutz, unknown person, unknown author. The next thing you know, the book is featured in Time magazine, major, major placement. Right after that, she's invited to fly to Paris to speak, at some conference, and she's on major stages all over in the US where I am. I mean, and forevermore, she's Eleanor Stutz, author of Nice Girls Do Get the Sale, as featured in Time magazine. In the same way, I can say about my own first book I wrote years ago, Crappy to Happy. Randy
I
Peyser,
love the
author
name.
of Crappy to Happy, as seen in the movie Eat, Pray, Love with Julia Roberts holding it up in a bookstore seat.
Mhm.
So it just lends tremendous credibility, which will open more doors for you. If you're the kind of person that wants to get up on stage and speak, for example, and you have a book that came out through that's been vetted, it's come out through a traditional publisher, your chances of getting on that stage and getting that speaking agreement are just going to go way, way up.
Mhm.
So those are really great reasons to try for a traditional publisher. Now, I primarily work with first time authors. So
Mhm.
just want to share that.
Uh, Two questions. On the
Yes.
conference when we met, you mentioned the interesting aspect of the fact that when the first-time authors come to you or they come to publishers, the one thing which is really important is the size of the email list. And you remember we were talking about that
Yes.
self-funding programs and stuff like that. So if somebody want to be published with a proper publisher without the person like yourself, so what are the steps they supposed to go through to actually get to publishers and to be chosen?
Well, publishers make their buying decisions. I'm talking about traditional publishers. They make their buying decisions based on two factors. One factor has to do with your content, and the other is the business side of publishing. So I'll address both very quickly. On the content side, you have to be able to answer this question. My book, and let's just pretend instead of saying my book, you would say your title, is the first book to fill in the blank. You have to have unique differentiation. If there's a conversation that's already happening, for example, that's kind of out in the public, then if you're bringing a unique perspective to it, you have a unique way to solve a problem. That's great positioning. Say title is the first book too. What we say is you own a lane. That's really, really important that you have differentiation. So, for example, in business books that I'm pitching right now to major publishers, HarperCollins, McGraw-Hill, the major publishers. And so the feedback I'm getting is, it used to be, let's talk about the Great Resignation. More recently, I'm hearing about quiet quitting. They wanted, I had a book I was pitching recently on the future of work and related to the future of work, which is a very big trending topic. And the author hadn't mentioned quiet quitting. So, multiple publishers came back and said, can you add a section on quiet quitting? Sure, we can. Now I'm hearing even another buzzword, which is quiet hiring or quiet rehiring, things like that. So this is like, we're talking about cutting edge. And so, if you're addressing an audience and your demographic are business people, you definitely want to know what's happening, what's the conversation that's happening, and how can you bring a unique solution to it. Like, I had a Zoom meeting with an acquisitions editor at McGraw-Hill, top business publisher in the world. And she said, I'm looking for, and these are words you might want to write down for all of nonfiction, because I've heard it from other publishers as well. I'm looking for outcome-driven titles and outcome-driven content. She said, I'm not looking for the big picture, broad picture book. That's not what she wants. She said, I'm looking for books that'll take a reader from point A to point Z with all the steps in between. So by the time the person finishes reading the book, they can actually apply something and do something differently.
I love it.
So
Uh,
outcome driven, write it down. It's important.
Absolutely. And another question in terms of the visibility, there is a concept in social media like the life of the content. And for different social medias, it is different timeline for video, for tweet and stuff like that. And I understand that the life of book is also have its own shelf life because giving an example, I obviously read a lot of books on branding and marketing, and branding and marketing industry is moving so fast and changing so fast that when we read books like from 5 years ago, people commented on Amazon like, yeah, it's nice book, but it's already outdated. It doesn't make any sense to read it. So when we talk about these outcome books, especially in business, because we talk about the trends, because we talk about things which
Right.
are on our tongue right now. So, what is the shelf life of this kind of books?
Well, here's the question that I would pose. Is your book evergreen? So, for example, the book that I mentioned, Nice Girls Do Get the Sale, it came out like over 20 years ago. They're still carrying it, and it's in multiple languages now. So if you have an evergreen topic, then it'll go. My book, Crappy to Happy, went for, I think, about 7 years. Excuse me, went for about 7 years. So
Mhm.
it's really hard to say, where you fit in. And you mentioned earlier about, like what publishers can you go after yourself? The publishers I'm accessing are not publishers you can go after yourself. These are, larger publishers and, people who have, uh, usually you have to have a book that's agented. They're not going to consider somebody who's contacting them directly. There are probably
Mhm.
many publishers, like independent publishers that perhaps you can contact. But the field I'm playing in are, people who I've known on a first name basis for over 20 years. And that's a field of about roughly 60 people, 60 different publishers and literary agents, and all the different people I pitch to. And a very dear friend of mine said, Randy, you have hug, hug, kiss, kiss relationships. These are first name relationships. These are people who have told me, Randy, I'm not even looking at the submissions on my email. I'm getting too many. When you have something for me, text me first. So, these are very, very, they're solid relationships.
I love it. The question is that is another strategy which I think is very popular nowadays, and I think Witherspoon speaking about this a lot because they're looking for specific books to convert them into the scenarios for movies, for channels, for Netflix or whatsoever,
Right.
and I think that many authors nowadays, they're not only looking to publish the books, they're actually straightforward aiming for some scenario or
Yes.
something like this. Can you highlight the idea how people can go through this, keeping in mind that they not just want to write a book, but also want to be on tele?
So think in terms of visuals. When you're writing, after you write a paragraph, can you close your eyes and actually see something happening? There's a difference. One of the main things that the problems that we see in writing in terms of content is telling versus showing. And one of the big rules in writing is show, don't tell. So the difference is if you can close your eyes and see something visually, you are showing something. If you tell me, for example, the boy was cold, I have no visual unless I choose to
Yeah.
make something up.
Hmm.
But or her heart was broken. I don't have a
Yeah.
visual, but if you tell me, she sat on her step weeping with her hands, over her face, I'm getting more of a visual. So make your writing visual. So that's just, one step.
Hmm. So
Yeah,
another question about
sure,
that. Can you take, for example, a book from someone, because you are a ghostwriter as well, and I understand that you are a brilliant editor as well, and somebody create a book, let's say like imaginary scenario, and this
sure.
book is not really visual, but they really, really want to be on TV or they want to aim
Oh,
the
definitely.
some kind of script.
Definitely.
Can you change it?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So I'm not the screenwriter, scriptwriter. My screenwriting guy is somebody who I've been sharing, projects with for 16 years. He has 38 years of experience doing this, and he worked for major studios like Disney and other ones. And so, for example, one of the books we're working on is actually nonfiction. He's working on, when I say we, the rhetorical we, he is working on is nonfiction, but he's taking the woman's principles and creating a whole story that embeds the principles within the characters. And so, I'm so excited because just in the past couple of weeks, I've made such major connections. We already have connections going to various entertainment agents who sell internationally, one who's very focused on social impact projects. I've just been making some huge connections. So we don't want to just help somebody write a screenplay. We want to help them get to that yes. And there's a difference between writing for um, a television, for a streaming series, or a feature movie. And so typically the first step is to read the book. Nick would be reading the book, and it's like a 12-hour process in which he's reading, analyzing. We have a coach for a day program, and then going through every single twist and turn to figure out where it is best, where it's going to be best suited before the screenplay is written. And so I'm just really excited about what we can offer, because we are getting things moving. For example, for the film festivals, it's really important to get yourself into film festivals and things like that. And so we have access to the film buyer for the Sundance Film Festival. Also, one of our channel partners she has an agreement with all these, like, the Cannes Film Festival, Tribeca, the Sundance, and all these major film festivals, where she is putting books into the film festival program guides. And they actually recently just got one picked up, by somebody sitting in the audience who's in a power position to make those decisions, sees this special ad for that particular book, and bam, jumped on it. So, we're just making lots of connections for authors to help them move into the film world.
Fantastic.
That's exciting.
Absolutely exciting.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. The steps which you share, they're really incredible, because you're speaking about how the book have to be visual, how it has to be the action oriented. And now I want to ask you the question, which is personally for me is like the peak of curiosity, because when I did study in National Academy of Art, basically my diploma is in book design. So it's not very known fact about me.
Yeah.
But which book cover can win the market? Do you know something about that?
Well, publishers don't want to see your book cover. They only work with their own graphic designers. So, if your book is going to a traditional publisher, you don't have to do anything regarding design. What I'm pitching is a manuscript that's double spaced, and a book proposal, which is a business plan that's mandatory when I pitch, where all agents and publishers require a book proposal for nonfiction. And what that is, it's a 20 to 30 page business plan, which I have a process for making it pretty simple for people to do this who are serious about getting a book deal. So when I pitch, it's my query letter, the book proposal, the manuscript, email, and then I forward all correspondence to the author so they see exactly who's being pitched, and any feedback we're getting, I share.
And if it is a route for the self-publishing, then?
For self-publishing, I have a referral partner, I send people to, because that's not my lane. My lane is, my differentiation is help first-time authors get their content right, which could mean book coaching, editing, or ghostwriting, depending on, what's preferable, what person wants, and get the book sold to a publisher. That's my lane. But there are factors like, earlier I mentioned, content, your unique differentiation is half of the conversation to get a book deal. And the other half is completely reliant on numbers. It's the business side of publishing. So, you're primarily addressing an audience that is not in the US. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you here are the exact questions when I've sat in meetings in New York with these agents and publishers, the exact questions they ask when I'm pitching anybody who is not living in the US. And these were pre-COVID questions. And so they would say things like, how often does the author come to the US? So now we can translate that, because there wasn't Zoom for all the 20 years that I've been pitching. And so we can say, how often are you in front of an audience in the US? Then they're going to ask, what are the sizes of the audiences you're in front of? Do you plan on coming to the US? I mean, it's like, what is the size of your social media following in the US? Because they primarily want to sell books here. It is very difficult to get books not impossible, but difficult to get books sold for authors who are not in the US.
Mm-hmm.
One of the one of the agents I pitched to, top agent, she's done a six-figure deal for one of my clients and has taken on other clients of mine. And she has offices in the UK and Australia
Mm-hmm.
and in New York. She lives in New York. And so, I had a client who actually flew in from Australia, to meet with me, meet with her. And she did sign that client and sold it in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be really, really challenging.
What is the size of audience they're looking for?
Well, in the US, typically what I'm seeing is they're looking for somebody who has 10,000 people. And they're
Mhm.
also tracking the amount of engagement using
Yeah.
apps. Like I just heard about one recently. I'm not an analytics kind of gal. That's not where I focus.
Mm-hmm.
But they're using an app called Social Blade is one I heard of, and they're rating authors on an ABCD scale.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to build numbers, like that's not what I do, but I have referral partners for that.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's on LinkedIn, like my LinkedIn guy brought my numbers from over 2,300 people, I'm now at like 20,900 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't do that myself. I'm not the person, sitting there smiling and dialing on LinkedIn. And like, well,
Oh.
here's another trick that authors can use is like, this is what one of my authors did. Now, unknown author with no book out yet. He's written a thriller. He's writing a thriller trilogy. He has completed book one in manuscript form. It's not under contract with an agent, with a publisher, nothing. He
Mm-hmm.
starts a podcast to talk about his books. Gets 20,000 downloads in the first 2 weeks. His name is Tony. I
Wow.
said, Tony, how'd you do this? And he said, well, I work with this guy, Gus Wagner, and he helped me do Facebook ads. I said, will you please introduce me to Gus Wagner? So I have a
Mm-hmm.
resource. So that's just one thing. If and then I told Tony, take screenshots. So when I'm pitching, if we can show powerful screenshots, because I was sitting with Angelina Jolie's literary agent in New York
Mm-hmm.
pre-COVID, and he was looking at my author on YouTube as I'm pitching him. I'm verbally pitching him. He pulls out his phone, and first I think he's just checking messages and not paying attention to me. And I'm like, oh my God, that's rude. No, he was checking out my author on YouTube, and he said, oh no, engagement's too small. Who else you got? And that is true all across the publishing industry. It's not, he's not the only one who's ever done that. They're looking
Wow.
at the amount of engagement you have with your audience. What's
Mm-hmm.
the size of your email list? Do you have an email list? And you don't have to be the one that builds all these things.
Yeah.
One of my authors, I sold an Oracle deck. It's coming out in May of 2023 from two
Mm-hmm.
women from the Métis tribe in Canada, an indigenous tribe that's never been represented in print. There's an author and artist. And
Mm-hmm.
they did a GoFundMe, and
Mm.
they pre-sold a whole bunch of decks. So it made it so much easier for me to sell their project. And I had,
Fantastic.
interest from, top mind, body, spirit publishers in the world from that. Oh, I want to share something really, really fun. Two
Go
days
on.
ago, 2 days ago, I got a personal email to me. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a mass email. This is a personal email to me from the largest publisher in the world, which is Hachette. They had
Mm-hmm.
started a new division, and they are looking for books that are holistic, very, like health and wellness, mind, body, spirit. And specifically, they were asking for books on advanced parenting. If anyone is listening, you've got a book on advanced parenting, please be in touch with me ASAP.
Very interesting. I
Yeah. So, I
actually
mean, I have
had
publishers, top
conversation with a
publisher in the
few
world.
speakers on the subject.
Yeah.
I may connect you with them. I don't know if
Wonderful.
they read about books, but they definitely speakers.
Wonderful.
Um, Interesting. So, thinking about this, let's move to our next question, which is authenticity. And for many people, I understand that when they deal with a ghostwriter, they're like, they think that ghostwriter is not really authentic. So only authentic book which can be written, it is written by them, from the beginning to the end, which always tell me that they don't know what editing is all about. But all right, the editing is needed, but ghostwriting is somebody else's writing the book. Can you highlight how does it work overall, like
Sure.
general idea?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that I do is like, I have a team of editors and ghostwriters who work for me who are unbelievably highly edited. They're some of the best editors in this country. And the
Mhm.
reason I say that is that they all come from traditional publishers, or they've edited or ghostwritten many books that have sold to traditional publishers.
Mhm.
So it was really important to me that anybody who was working for me really understands what publishers buy, because what publishers buy is what readers buy. So even if somebody's
Yes.
going to self-publish, if we're just working on the content side of things, for example, we want to make sure it's a book that readers are going to buy, regardless
Mhm.
of, which avenue a person chooses for their publishing route.
Mhm.
So for the way we work is that first, just have a complimentary conversation. I do a 15-minute chat with people to find out, what are you interested in? These are the different pathways to write a book, and then let's say, for book coaching or for ghostwriting, the first step is have a complimentary conversation with the ghostwriter. You want to really get this person, listen to what they say. I'll share their credentials. They're all unbelievably highly credentialed, but you want to know that you feel comfortable, you feel rapport with that person. So
Mhm.
let's say you do. So then I issue a contract. In the first phase, whether for it's book coaching or ghostwriting, is to create the theme and the detailed chapter outlines. So this is going to provide a roadmap for the rest of the book. So that's done over, a number of interviews by phone. I would imagine overseas it would be, via Zoom. And so, agreeing on this is, these are the detailed chapter outlines. And creates the roadmap for the book. Then after that, with book coaching, the author would be writing it themselves and submitting each chapter and getting feedback, getting more feedback, rewriting. Then we do a polishing editing round at the end. For ghostwriting, once the roadmap is clear and approved of, then we're writing like per chapter and constant getting feedback from the author. Does the critical things in ghostwriting, does it sound like you? Is this the way you speak? It's got to be
Mhm.
you. It can't be stilted. It's you. And is the message correct? So voice and message they're just absolutely crucial that we
Mhm.
nail it. And by getting feedback immediately, it might not even be the whole first chapter. It might be like, here's 3 pages. Are we sounding like you?
Mhm.
So that, and even in the conversations in the interviews, we're listening, the ghostwriter's listening, how do you speak? And, making it sound like you. Are you very formal? Are you informal? Are you funny or sarcastic? Whatever's coming across, we want to be able to match your tone, your emotions around it. And that's really important. So like some of the books we've done have gone, that we've ghostwritten have been 6-figure deals. Now, let's address the authenticity factor even more. There are 2 ways when a ghostwriter is working. Like we are completely confidential.
Mhm.
That means we asked to be listed as, in your acknowledgement section as editors, thanking us as, editors for your book. Nobody knows which books we've ghostwritten.
Mhm.
But I can share with you the books we ghostwrite, the majority of them sell and sell quickly because they're written really well.
Mhm.
There's another way to do it. If you say, well, that's just really not me, and to me, that just doesn't feel authentic to me. And
Mhm.
then we could put our names, we've never done this before, but we could, if this was an issue for you. You might see a lot of books where it has you as the author name under the title and it says with so and so. And the with
Mhm.
person is the ghostwriter. So you are acknowledging that the book has been ghostwritten. But
Mhm.
that's typical.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. I mean, most people who choose the ghostwriting path choose it for one or two reasons, or both reasons. Time is an issue. They're too busy or they just don't have the skill or interest to write the whole book, and they much rather have a pro do it.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's got to be the right match on both sides. So,
I wonder if the person, like myself, for example, English is my third language, so definitely I wouldn't sound like an English speaking person half of the time. So, how the ghostwriter will match that? Because I hope the ghostwriter is
well,
actually
yes. I mean, where does the
native
book go?
British or Native American. I'm not,
Right.
not,
So,
yeah,
it's
native
going to
British. You
depend.
can be Native American is a different person.
Yes. I
I
mean,
mean,
obviously, it just
there's.
takes more work, because there's the
Mhm.
ghost writing, which creates a ghost written draft. And then there would need to be maybe multiple rounds to get the English right.
Mhm.
Or, obviously, if there's a language issue, it is going to take longer. Is the ghostwriter hearing what you're saying correctly to start with? Things like that. So,
Mhm.
um, that, it all gets worked out. It just does. And so let's
So
say
it's
somebody
possible.
writes their own book, like, I had a book recently, and maybe the man's in Australia or the UK or somewhere. And like, no, he was in India. And but he's
Mm,
writing in English and he writes really well, but it's Indian English. And so, so
yeah.
that's an editing round, that we'll just go in, we'll fix spelling and things like that.
Hmm. That's interesting. So pretty
Yeah,
much, I think that we can reassure people that the ghostwriting doesn't butcher your original story. It's actually enhance it because I think it's a big concern for many people really to go to the
right.
root of the ghostwriting. And personally, I think it's a huge time saver. I would probably one day will go this route for
Yes.
sure because I'm not very confident in writing. I'm dyslexic, so I can do 5 mistakes in a word of 3 letters. So it's a different story. So I want to ask you, you already gave so many recommendations, which literally create a roadmap for people. So, with your 3 best advice, which is our next section of the interview, can you complete this roadmap for people so that when they people start connecting with you, they actually know what you offer, where to begin, where to start?
Oh, sure.
So,
Sure.
just 3 best advice.
Yeah, yeah. I
Go.
mean, I like to start with just a 15-minute conversation. And if I can guide that conversation, I can ask all the right questions to know where the person is best positioned. And, I will never waste anyone's time or money. I am not about that at all. I love getting people book deals, but it's got to be the right book and the right business side of things. And, like I have authors who come in with very low publicity, very, very low. And I'll say, okay, here's my LinkedIn guy, go play. And the next thing you know, the LinkedIn guy is doing something called growth hacking. And all of a sudden the numbers are growing within 6 months and we're there. So there are ways around stuff. So the first thing is a 15-minute conversation. If somebody has written their own book, then I always send, after that conversation, I send everyone my confidentiality agreement. You don't want to be speaking, sending your material to anyone unless you have that non-disclosure agreement in place. So everybody gets that and my rate sheet. I never throw surprises at people. And I won't, like I said, I will never waste anyone's money. Then they're
Mm.
welcome to send the manuscript that they've written it for a bid. And that bid is just to read it, analyze it. We use the comments bar in Word to point out anything that feels weak that needs to be strengthened by you as the author. And we're also discerning, is this a manuscript that we really think a publisher will be interested in considering and potentially buying? Because I'm not going to pitch anything unless it's stellar and we think it's sellable.
Mhm.
So that's usually a first step. If somebody's interested in book coaching or ghostwriting, then the next step is complimentary conversation with the book coach slash ghostwriter, because all my book coaches are also ghostwriters. So depending on which way people want to go. And then if people are interested after that conversation and I get a yes from both sides, from the person and from the ghostwriter or book coach. And then we just move ahead from there. And they set up the first time to meet with the person and start the interview process to create the theme and then the detailed chapter summaries.
Do you think it's more productive to start with coaching with you and like the conversation with you before people get into the book, or already come to you with a manuscript? Because
Doesn't
in
matter.
my, you
It
think?
really doesn't matter. I intercept people wherever they are. Some people just have an idea. And let's say their idea looks like this. And all of a sudden, I know publishers are looking for this if they're willing to change their positioning a little bit. It really doesn't matter. I like to interact with people from wherever they are. I can tell you the biggest obstacle, I want to share this. Everybody needs to know this. If you want a
Mhm.
traditional publisher, the biggest obstacle that you might encounter has to do if you've done a previous book that you've self-published and your sales numbers are low and that book's up on Amazon. Publishers will look you up within 3 seconds. I was on a Zoom call and I'm pitching a book and the acquisitions editor is on a side computer and all of a sudden I see, she's looking at my author's previous book sales on Amazon. In less than 1 second of being on Amazon with her software, she has her sales numbers. And if
Mhm.
your sales numbers aren't where a publisher needs it to be, for them to offer you a deal, they're not going to offer you a deal on that book or on your next book. We have to prove sales, meaning do a GoFundMe, do something so we can actually prove sales, because now you have a track record that's speaking for you.
And where the number's supposed to be approximately?
So this is what I've heard. This is what I've heard. A mid-range publisher wants to see that as a self-published author, you have sold 3,500 to 5,000 books in the first year. Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, these larger publishers, if you have self-published, they want to see that you've sold 10,000 books.
Well,
These are, these are kind of standard. Sometimes there are exceptions to all rules everywhere, but these are in general terms, this is what I'm encountering.
And they are looking for the numbers, or like say if you post on Amazon especially, there are plenty of techniques when people post and create the bestseller. So the sales comes through audiobooks or through Kindle books, which are not really expensive. So it could be like 10,000 of Kindle books. Does that important? Does that impact or not?
All of it. It's numbers. This is part of the numbers conversation. So years ago, I think it was
that's
like back
much easier.
Yes. So I think it was back like around 2007 or so. I was having a conversation with a literary agent. He said, Randy, it's all come down to publishers sitting with their calculators and they're comparing one person's numbers to another. So, great ways to build numbers are, do a TED Talk or do something. There's a new thing now called BLU, Blue Talks. Like one of my authors, the Tao of Influence, had 1 million views on YouTube for her TED Talk on the Tao of Influence. Did I get her a book deal within 2 weeks? Yes. Did that, book wind up on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list for 5 weeks as best hardcover business book? Yes. I have another author who did a podcast, a Mind, Body, Spirit podcast. And she had proof of 500,000 downloads of her podcast. These are, large numbers. But minimally what I'm seeing is that you have to have 10,000. That's minimal.
That's interesting because it's actually an eye-opener for many people who underestimate social media. So it's really important to have good numbers, and unfortunately it's all doable. The numbers game can be hacked a little bit. So there are plenty of techniques for that, but in reality I know many authors, unfortunately, who were published, and they were published through some smaller publishers or self-published, and they really didn't get this number. So they didn't get that kind of excitement. So they were excited when they were writing the book and when they in the process of publishing, but they were not excited with results. Do you think it is possible to somehow improve this result? So we have negative record. So let's say, we have situation. So how to improve it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, if we have to, like air quotes here, prove sales, like do a GoFundMe, do something where you can generate the largest list of names possible. To say these are people who are committed to buying my book once it comes out. Now, here's one thing that you could do. This is a strategy that nobody, I don't think, ever mentions anywhere, but it is something that I think can help people. Let's say, you've written your book. And it's been edited. You don't want to do this. What I'm going to suggest, if your book has not been polished, what I want you to do is take just your first page and you're going to send it out to everyone just only your first page, no more than your first page. And you're going to ask them to give you feedback. And this is the way you're going to do it. You're going to say, I'm writing a new book on blah, blah, blah. Would you be willing to give me some feedback that's really important for me in my pursuit of a publisher? And then you're going to say things like, and I want you to do this like multiple choice. I want honest feedback that will, help me to know if I'm on the right path. So you're giving them permission to give you honest feedback, but this is the way you need to do it because nobody wants to hurt your feelings. And so you're going to give them multiple choice options. And these are the kinds of questions you want to ask them, like in a survey. Would you continue to read my first page based on my first line? And then give them some multiple choice. Yes, absolutely. Possibly. no way, Jose. I mean, and make, and then put other. So you give them actually room to write something in if they want to say something. Then you'll say, based on the first paragraph, would you continue reading this first page? And then your next question might be something like, based on this first page, would you continue reading my book,
Hmm.
this book? So if you say this book, it makes it a little bit less personal, which is helpful in getting honest feedback.
Hmm.
But you always want to include like something really, really fun, like when I said like, no way, Jose, but just some line like, oh my God, don't quit your day job, like something like that. So you're giving them permission.
Hmm.
Now, if somebody responds, all the people who respond to you, you're going to send them a letter, a follow-up letter that says, thank you for giving me honest feedback. This is very helpful for me as I pursue my dreams of getting my book deal.
Hmm.
And then you're going to ask the question,
Hmm.
would you be interested in hearing from me when my book comes out?
Hmm.
Would you be interested, or you could say things like, especially if you've gotten great feedback, would you be willing to tell your peeps about my book
Hmm.
when it comes out? If I send you, a letter, to will you help me in my book launch? Something like that.
Hmm.
And so what you're doing now, you're generating a very warm list.
Hmm.
If we can come back to a publisher and say, well, we've got 1,500 people who are interested in the book already,
Hmm.
names and email addresses.
Hmm.
We don't have to list all their names and email addresses, but we can say, they're ready to buy. I
Hmm.
mean, things like that are a great way to
Hmm.
overcome
Yeah,
that obstacle.
that's a long way to write in, like, 15,000 emails, I can imagine. But you can hire VA for that, obviously. I just imagine
Right.
I hate writing emails, so it's like already like, oh my God, 15,000 emails. I
Well,
have
no,
to
I mean,
write and then.
I hear you. I got to take some water.
But I totally agree with you. It's actually a brilliant way to connect with people if you don't have money, if you can't invest in ads, if you can't communicate with people like, on wider level, like through talks or through social media. So it's brilliant way, absolutely. And it's more personal and it will give you more
Yep.
conversions eventually. It's true.
Don't know why my voice is going, but it is.
That's okay. So that's a very interesting way to, like, very practical, I think. It's like whatever you
Right.
say, you
Right, right,
preach
right.
that. It's like take
Yes,
an
yes, yes.
action step. So I
Yes.
absolutely love it. So how
I would
people.
like to address something that no one in the
Yeah.
entire publishing industry addresses. And
Hmm.
it's so important. As far as I know, I'm the only person on the planet that addresses this. And it's critical, every person listening. And it has to do with fear. So when we talked about visibility,
Mm.
especially, all of us, and I don't think there's a person on the planet that doesn't have a set point for fear somewhere.
Hmm.
Some of us are already on big stages, some aren't, but want to grow to that place. You have that, you're holding that vision for yourself. And the idea of approaching major media can be very, very scary if you haven't done it
Yeah.
and you're not like an experienced pro at it. So how do you get there? Especially because you're holding a dream. You want to impact people with your message. That's
Hmm.
your dream. It's your vision. You
Yeah.
can see yourself going bigger and bigger and bigger, but you're not there yet. So this was me about 24 years ago or so. And I'm in New York and I'm pitching my first book, Crappy to Happy. And I'm on the show floor of this big publishing industry feeding frenzy. It's a feeding frenzy. There's 40,000 people and everybody's going really, really fast and making their connections. And this is me. Oh my God. But I want to make connections and I'm pursuing my dream to, be an author, not just be an author, but I wanted a career as an author.
Hmm.
And so I'm walking along with a very dear friend of mine who's a national publicity strategist here in the US. We're walking along, and all of a sudden she goes, Wall Street Journal. And, she's lunging after the person, makes the connection. This was me, Wall Street Journal. And I'm following after her.
Hmm.
And then she makes the connection. We move on. And all of a sudden she looks and, and she sees like, you know, another major one, like, oh, Oprah magazine, and she's rushing after that.
Hmm.
And this was me, Oprah, you know. And what I discovered is I have or had something that I call the hiccup of hesitation. And the
Hmm.
hiccup of hesitation is when we're pursuing our dreams, but there's that little hiccup, that little fear. It's like, oh my God, I am going for it, but we hold those fears wherever they are. And so I decided in that moment, I wanted to overcome that fear. I want to be more visible. And
Mm.
so this is what I did. I decided I'm going to model my friend on the show floor. And we're walking along. All of a sudden, I saw like, New York Times, and, just like lunging after the person with no
Hmm.
backstep, no hiccup. I made the connection. And so, what I say to myself, and when you notice where you have
Hmm.
hiccups, whether it's around a publishing dream or anything, it could be career, relationship, anywhere where you're feeling those little backsteps. What I say to myself that you can say to yourself, if you want to overcome that backstep in that moment,
Hmm.
I say, go,
Yeah.
go,
Hmm.
go. And notice when I say it, I don't go, I go, go. It's like I'm projecting forward, I'm moving myself forward.
I love it. Basically, like when you deal with freeze, fly, and attack, you actually choose attack all the time instead of fly. So, like, tiger, jump. Like,
I only attack with love.
yeah, of course. I mean, the point
Uh,
of
uh,
go, you basically
yes,
move forward.
right.
So it's always the action taking. I mean, because in my program I work with this aspect a little bit. It literally send me to the techniques which we teach with video, like
Yes,
address every single fear with the idea that it benefit you somehow. It's like your stage now, like I'm a star of the show, that's how you go
yes,
live, stuff like that. It's really powerful because I think that the mindset is a major thing which stops people from achieving their goals. And I know it on my own. Even when I teach people to overcome fears, I have my own fears. So it's really a choice what you say, like we not remove the fears, we really just dealing with the fears, I guess that's what you say,
yes.
right?
And when you're speaking, whether it's on Zoom or in person, this is the way I started, which is, way before Zoom, but I looked for the kind eyes. There were always kind eyes in every audience. And they're usually people you don't even know, but you can tell they're rooting for you. There's this brightness, there's this kindness in their eyes. So look for the kind eyes. Another thing that will get you more comfortable with speaking, this is another thing I did when I started, is that I made a list of about 11 to 15 questions that a host could ask me
Hmm.
for a podcast, radio show, blog, whatever. But I made two copies of the same list. So one went to the host and the other one went to me. However, I put my answers on my copy.
Hmm.
So it's and like I started out, it was before Zoom, so it was radio. And
Hmm.
so I wasn't even visible. And so I could be looking down at my sheet as I was being asked various questions and just bullet points. You don't have to write out paragraphs or like, say it word for word so it feels stilted. You don't want to do that. You don't want because we're being authentic, but just like bullet points, like, oh, there's a certain story you want to share to tell that particular point. You write the, just little reminders that are just going to get your brain going. Oh yeah, I want to tell that story. And then the more and more you start speaking, the easier it gets.
I, for some reason, this kind eyes are still haunting me. I really love that like idea of looking for the kind eyes. It resonates in the heart area, so to say. It's like, you're looking
Yes,
for kindness, you're looking, expect for
yes,
love. And that's
yes,
actually kills all the fear. Expect that people love you, expect that people kind to you. And it's really eliminate the idea of that you have to be protective over yourself because people love you
yes.
ultimately, you
You
know?
know, I at one point I started doing a one-woman show, speaking of terrifying, and one time my show just completely bombed. I did it a number of times, but early on, one of my shows completely bombed. And what I said to myself afterwards was, I said, well, I just had a near-death experience because I died on stage and I moved on. I just moved on from there. And rewrote, tweaked things, and all of a sudden, then it took off. It's just part of the process. We're human
Yeah.
beings.
It's amazing. You give so much wisdom. How people can connect with you.
The easiest way is just go to my website and click on a link that says contact, to
Mhm.
get on my calendar or whatever. And my website is
I
www.author
will add the
one
links below
stop.
for sure.
Yeah, author1stop.com. And the one is spelled out ONE, author1stop.com. And that's just the easiest.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this interview.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was great fun.